She will bend the knee to the most radical elements of her party. That's exactly what she did here. That's what she's going to keep on doing as president. That's why we got to elect Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. And I'll take just a couple more here, and then we got to hit the road. Thank you all.
Senator, do you think you have any similarities with Walz? And you're both from the Midwest, and you work in the...
Can you start that again?
Yeah, do you think you have any similarities? And you can talk about like common ground that you share with Walz.
Well, look, I mean, yeah, we're white guys from the Midwest. I guess there are similarities there. But what's different is the actual ideas about how best to serve people, white, black, or anything else, in the Midwest and everywhere else, right? I can't believe this is a guy who tries to claim that he stands for working people, and yet he wants to pursue energy policies that are going to ship everybody's job to China. In some ways, what Tim Walz represents is doubling down on failed 30 years of leadership in this country where we don't make enough of our own stuff, we don't use enough of our own workers to make enough of our own stuff, we rely on everybody else for energy instead of American citizens, and then we throw open the southern border to make our communities less livable and less safe. He is the double down choice for failed leadership, and again, Kamala Harris selected him. I don't know why, but I think it's because she's fundamentally a radical herself and she wanted a partner in crime. Ma'am.
Let's talk a little bit about foreign policy. Could you tell me how you handle the two largest conflicts in the world today, that being in Ukraine and also in Israel? Not so much what has been done wrong, but what you would do going forward.
Well, I think the most important thing you got to do is kick Kamala Harris the hell out of office, right? I mean, that's going to make the world a lot more safer and more secure. Look, in Israel, I think it's actually very simple. What we all want, meaning the Israelis and any American with an ounce of common sense, which I think is 99% of our country, we want the war to end, we want Hamas to be destroyed, and then we want the Israelis to be able to build a peace process with the Sunni Arab neighbors to build a counterbalance to Iran. That's it, right? It's very simple. Now the problem is, Kamala Harris on the one hand says that she really cares about civilian casualties and really wants the war to end, and yet she refuses to give Israel the weapons that allow them to minimize civilian casualties and bring the war to a close end. It's the dumbest policy maybe in the history of American foreign policy to prolong this war, to promote the death of innocent civilians, and that is the Kamala Harris approach to the Middle East. Now, in Russia and Ukraine, I saw a report just a couple of days ago that the Ukrainians are running out of fighting men to actually staff the war. You've got to believe in peace, and you've got to bring peace to that region of the world. Russia would have never invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump was president, and now, thank you. And now we are where we are, and if you want to bring peace to that region, you need a negotiator who Vladimir Putin respects. Does anybody here, and obviously we're in a biased crowd, but does anybody here actually think that Vladimir Putin respects Kamala Harris? She's afraid of all of you. She sure as hell isn't going to be able to sit in an audience with Vladimir Putin and push for a reasonable peace. So we've got to have a person who understands diplomacy, who understands that America does have negotiating leverage, that shuts off energy in places, or shuts off access to energy in places where you have bad guys running the energy policy, rebuilds the American energy sector, allows us to project power overseas, and makes Vladimir Putin know that we got to bring peace, and you got to have a respect for an American president who can do that. And then we'll do one more question. Well, look, it's ultimately President Trump's decision, but President Trump has shown again and again, as much as the media accused him of being a wild cowboy, President Trump believes in the power of diplomacy. Love a guy or hate a guy, disagree with a foreign leader or agree with him, you've got to be willing to engage in diplomacy. The Kamala Harris approach of saber rattling while the world goes to hell has clearly not worked. We've got a war in the Middle East, we've got a war in Europe, we've got threatened war in East Asia. Kamala Harris's approach has failed. Donald Trump's approach delivered world peace. I think I know who I'm supporting in 2024. One final question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Women that have been offended by your childless cat women comments, and also do you have any plans for the 11 million of undocumented Hispanic people who have been paying taxes in the U.S. for decades?
Well, look, the plan with people who have come into the country illegally is you've got to be willing to deport some of them. I mean, this is not rocket science. If you have, look, if you've got 20 million illegal aliens in this country, not all of them are bad people. Most of them are probably very good people. But if you break the law to come into this country, you've got to be willing to send some of those people back. That's the Donald Trump approach. And if you don't do that, you don't have a real border, and the people who will suffer the most are the people right behind me who are going to continue to have their communities poisoned by the fentanyl that the Mexican drug cartels bring across that open border. Now, you asked about the remarks that I made that were, you said that they were offensive to millions of women. Well, here's what I'd say. Thank you, ma'am. I love you too. What I said is very simple. I think American families are good and government policy should be more pro-family. Now, if the media wants to get offended about a sarcastic remark I made before I even ran for the United States Senate, then the media is entitled to get offended. You know what I'm offended by? I'm offended that normal Americans can't afford grocery prices. I'm offended that Kamala Harris opened up the American southern border and allowed fentanyl to come into our communities. And I'm offended that she wants to be the people's president, but she won't even answer tough questions. That's what I'm offended by, and I think that's what most Americans are offended by too. And I guess on that note, I should say, thank you all for having me. It's great to be here. If I can ask you to just do one thing. We have got thank you. We have got an incredible amount of momentum. We've got an incredible amount of capacity to win this race, but it's going to require every single one of us doing everything we can. So, our national motto is "In God We Trust." God tells us to hope and not despair. So let's get out there, let's work the phones, let's knock on the doors, let's get everybody out there to vote, and let's re-elect Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. I know I can count on you. God bless you guys. I love you. Thank you.